In today's manhwa, we will be in the shoes of a loser schoolboy who is hated by the whole country because of his maniac father. But everything changes when this guy becomes the Lord of Hell with the help of a mysterious application. The first message that greets us immediately tells us about something not very good. The inscription says that our main character is going to hell. An unremarkable guy with black hair, finding himself in a location called a dungeon, looks around and does not understand what happened to him. A few moments later, the guy tries to get to his feet. He turns to his friend to ask what he's doing, but he's all alone here. The guy continues to be completely confused. Apparently, he came to this place quite unexpectedly. The courage of our protagonist did not last long. In a panic, he continues to ask his friend to pull him out of this strange and frightening place. Having heard absolutely nothing in response, the poor fellow stops begging his friend and begins to threaten him to get him out of here as soon as possible. Apparently, before he got here, this guy was an ardent fan of skibidi toilets because he clearly had some problems. He continued to threaten the void. Suddenly, the icon with the monster that was in Kim Kwan's interface began to burn with purple fire. What does it mean? However, this purple ball did not intend to stop at the previous icon. Instead, it jumped to the icon on which a hand was drawn. The next moment, we observe a huge hand, which apparently controls this strange purple fire. This hand was clearly not friendly, because Kim Kwan right now received perhaps the most powerful slap of his life. It would seem, what damage can a regular click do? But Kim Kwan-woo fully felt the full power of this damage. After all, the hand that received the slap was several times larger than Kim Kwan. Everything fell into place. Our main character was somehow sealed into some kind of game in which the player had unlimited possibilities. The beatings of our main character continued. However, after the player saw that Kim Kwan-woo's health began to decrease, he stopped his series of killer fatherly clicks for some time. It was difficult to tell from the guy's face that these bruises were the consequences of an ordinary finger. Our main character tried to come to his senses. A few moments later, that same index finger reached out to the icon on which the monster was drawn. He clearly intended to check what it was doing. The inventory that opened after that same menu opened obviously would not have pleased our protagonist because in this window there were many tools with which one could make Kim's life more fun. Apparently the person on the other side of the screen was a fan of the Chainsaw Man, so his finger rushed towards the icon with a drawn chainsaw. The player clearly did not doubt his decision for a second, because not even a moment passed before the button lit up with a purple light. After this, bullying of our main character began in a variety of ways. I am sure that no one would want to see this, much less feel it. Suddenly, the course of events is interrupted and transferred to 15 years ago. We watch a news episode that talks about the case of Mu Huandong, who went to a better world. After the guy's father went to a better world, his mother did not want to stay and followed him, leaving her son completely alone. The same child who was left completely alone due to the fault of his father's murderer said that he wants more than anything in the world for the person who committed this crime to burn in hell. Tears welled up in his eyes, and he found no other choice but to fly on a swing that he himself made at home, using a rope and a piece of soap. He liked the swing he made with his own hands so much that he seemed to be floating with happiness. Next, we watch a man who is in an apartment that is clearly not filled with positivity. We also see a happy family portrait in the middle of which there is a cheerful boy. The story that is now beginning before your eyes tells you about the son of that same killer, which is clearly not going well. The course of events is transferred to the educational institution in which that same unfortunate son of the murderer whose entire country hates is currently studying. It's immediately clear from this guy that he's having a hard time in life. His gaze is bewilderedly fixed on the floor. This unfortunate guy's name is Lee Yoon-woo, and a moment later he receives a rather noticeable blow from the person opposite him. This guy is being tortured not only in the real world, but also in the virtual space, that is, on social networks. Everyone curses the family of that same killer and the killer's lonely son. I would like to believe that this bully is just trying to get a bug out of Lee Yoon-woo's hair that accidentally got there, but that's not the case. These skibidi toilet fans are making fun of a guy who is innocent of anything. Instead of supporting this guy or discussing the new series of skibidi toilets, these ardent fans of dubious series are trying various tricks on the poor guy. The bully takes Lee Yoon-woo by the hair to demonstrate another move to his friends. From the boy's look, it's clear that this is not the first time this has happened to him. These bullies, according to the canons of all American stereotypes, took his lunch from the nerd and the loser, and despite his difficult situation, they also made fun of his late mother. While we watch Lee Yoon-woo having lunch, he talks about how everyone says that he doesn't deserve to be happy, and that's how it should be. After some time, Lee Yoon-woo comes to a very sad but true truth. His pain constantly brings joy to everyone. While our main character is talking, the bullies continue to bully Lee Yoon-woo in every possible way. At this time, the main bully is going to do something more significant. However, the main bully was never able to demonstrate his main move because he was puzzled by the unexpected approach of a person from behind. He tried to turn around to see who it was. Apparently, it was already too late because two bullies of lower rank were already in a panic and were trying to warn the main bully that the girl behind him was about to do something. Dear viewers, you can rejoice because right now on the screen you are watching Justice. The girl behind who suddenly appeared was already ready to strike. It was impossible to escape from this blow because it was a blow of justice. At that moment, poor Lee Yoon-woo began to think that there really was a person who did not consider him a non-entity. The bullies immediately began to swear at this girl, asking her why she did it, but the girl deftly countered by answering him to shut up. While this showdown continued, Lee Yoon-woo tried to clear his throat, because just recently his neck was in the grip of the same bully who was now lying on the asphalt. Suddenly, the bully gathered his strength and used his remaining testosterone to approach this girl and threaten her, saying that if she is the daughter of a minister, this does not give her the right to do whatever she wants. The girl was definitely not a miss because her face didn't even flinch for a moment. She told the bully that he was so scared that he wouldn't even be able to strike. She also continued by saying if he wanted to see how his ancestors would lick her father's shoes. This girl's name was So-hee. She was the only daughter of an influential family. One could say that she was a modern princess. The guy, unable to tolerate insults, swung at the girl. Soha didn't care about this pathetic attempt by the bully to assert herself. She also maintained her composure. After a while, she got tired of messing around with these hooligans. With a deft movement of her hand, she took the spray out of her pocket and aimed it straight at the hooligan's eyes. A moment later, the girl sprayed the contents of the spray directly into the bully's eyes. She called the spray Wheezing, as that was the name of the poisonous Pokemon. Soka's actions were always unpredictable for everyone. After an unexpected and witty attack, the guy held his face with his hands and tried to relieve the pain. So he took the poor man by the hand and began to walk away from here. They shouted after her that not everything was okay with her. So he answered them that life was unpredictable and warned that they should not follow them. The action moves to a small park which is located near the educational institution where these two studied. The guy reminded So-hee that right now it was class time and they should go back, but the girl did not want to listen to this and asked Lee Yoon to shut up. Lee Yoon also thanked So-hee for coming at a difficult time and helping him out of trouble, but he added that she shouldn't have done that. While this time, these two, walking through the park, held each other's hands. Perhaps they did not even realize it. Lee Yoon explained his worries by saying that these bullies could come back at any moment and do something bad to So-hee because she helped him. Having finished his explanation, the beaten guy tried to convince So-hee that everything was fine with him and she should no longer interfere when these bullies bullied him. Suddenly, the girl turned sharply towards our main character and asked him to stop talking nonsense because she couldn't just stand and watch what these hooligans were doing to him. The guy was clearly not a Sigma, so when he heard a slightly harsh answer from a person of the opposite sex, he was confused. He was also slightly insulted so that he would not relax. However, Lee Yoon did not intend to back down in his beliefs because So-hee stood up for him, she received a blow. The guy continued to try to convince her to stop standing up for him. Hearing this, So-hee surprisingly didn't immediately find something to answer. She just looked at Lee Yoon for a while. Perhaps she was doing mewing. Lee Yoon, taking advantage of So-hee's silence, continued to explain that everything that happens to him is the norm for others, so she really shouldn't risk her health. He sincerely did not understand why So-hee was ready to suffer because of someone like him, because he is a high school student whom the whole country hates. In addition, the poor guy added that he had long been accustomed to this time, and now he feels almost nothing when he is being bullied again. He summed up everything that was said by saying that she really needs to stop. The guy, or the owner of the victim's eyes, once again repeated to the girl opposite that he didn't want her to be hurt because of him. He also added that everything that happens and happened to him should not concern her. In the depths of his soul, Lee Yoon was sure that everything So-hee did that day was just a momentary sympathy that was unfounded. In addition to all this, Lee Yoon understood that according to all the canons of reality, a princess and a poor man simply cannot be friends because reality is cruel. After listening to Lee Yoon's speech, So-hee continued to assert, despite all the words of our protagonist, that everything that happens to him concerns her. The guy tried to convince her of the opposite. For the next minute, the two just kept saying the same thing. So-hee saying that it concerns her, and our main character kept saying the opposite. However, it was already becoming awkward, and our main character, instead of continuing to tell the girl the opposite, turned around for the last time and said that his life really does not concern the girl's life. He also asked for forgiveness for what happened. Finally, Lee Yoon asked the modern Princess Sohee to simply ignore his existence because she cannot change anything, no matter how influential she is. Before our main character had time to move away even a few tens of meters, Sohee suddenly repeated the same phrase again, that his life concerns her. She asked Lee Yoon to believe it. Lee Yoon stopped awkwardly and didn't know what to answer, and this is not because he never talked to women, but because he was really puzzled by such a strange interest on Soha's part. Suddenly, Sohee said something that no one had ever mentioned before. She said that he should get his act together, because he is not to blame for this attitude towards himself, because he is not to blame for the fact that his father committed a terrible crime. Sohee was like an angel who descended from heaven. Albeit with some oddities, she called our main character a kind and sincere guy. She also added that no one has the right to offend him. Lee Yoon was so moved by the words that were uttered from Soha's lips that tears immediately began to well up in his eyes. Just the thought that he was not to blame caused strange emotions in him. Terrible and cruel episodes from his life began to pop up in his head. He recalled that from childhood he was bullied, and one of the first who did this was his father, who was a terrible person. The thoughts that he was not to blame for everything that was happening and happened, that he did not choose his father, made him think a lot, but the dark episodes of his life clearly reminded him of not the good times. This poor guy, who had a very difficult life, found it difficult to believe that he could be loved by someone and that he could deserve happiness. Despite the fact that everything that happened in this park moved Lee Yoon to tears, he still suppressed it all by telling himself that it was all just an arrogant delusion. And this girl, who had an influential status, simply fed the arrogant delusion of our protagonist. After some time, the clear daytime slowly gave way to the onset of evening. Sohee and Lee Yoon were heading somewhere together. The girl was talking on the phone. Sohee asked her phone interlocutor where he was and where he was going. Later, she told him to grab his clothes and head to her house. At this time, Lee Yoon was silent. Our main character certainly appreciated Soha's concern, but he still wondered what he should do next. He couldn't help but think that the bullies would definitely come back for him. He also couldn't get it out of his head that if Sohee fell into their hands, she would get it too, and it would all be on his conscience. Suddenly, the guy's thoughts were interrupted by a mysterious and familiar purple notification from his slightly outdated iPhone. Looking at the source of the vibration, the guy was very puzzled. Perhaps he was puzzled by this strange purple glow from his pocket, because this is really not the norm. Unlocking his phone, Lee Yoon saw a previously familiar to us, but unfamiliar to him, mysterious notification from a program called Hell Rising. The text of the message said about creating hell and destroying the devil's workshop after receiving a reward. Suddenly, the course of events moves to some street where something is clearly happening, perhaps a discussion of the second season of A Magical Battle. Approaching closer to the center of events, we observe someone's screams coming from some alley. Approaching even closer, the situation becomes clearer. A gang of hooligans again bothers some poor guy who just wanted to play Genshin Impact. This poor guy was clearly very lucky in the Genshin Impact, and apparently for this reason, hooligans who were simply jealous of him attacked him in order to apparently steal his account. Suddenly, the hooligans' polite requests for an account to the poor guy are interrupted by a call. A guy with a shiny hairstyle tells his boss Kim Kwan that he is calling. The bald guy advises him to answer. However, the main bully was not in a very good mood for conversation, which is why he turned to his bald friend and explained his anger by the fact that this guy had neither rich ancestors nor money. At that moment, even one of the hooligans realized that all this had gone too far. He mentally called him a bad person, because a cool Genshin Impact account is not a reason to beat a person like that. However, despite his not very pleasant character, the guy still listened to his friend and took the phone. The voice from the phone chuckled at the fact that Kim Kwan-woo was again in his style. But the guy who had recently eaten a hot dog with copious amounts of ketchup was not in a very good mood for jokes. He immediately asked the caller why he called him. Suddenly, unexpectedly for Kim Kwan-woo, a voice from the phone ordered him to stop touching the poor guy with a rich Genshin account. In addition, the voice added that he would look after him. Kim Kwan-woo was dumbfounded to say the least. The bald guy was probably the most brainy of this pair of hooligans. Immediately after the request of the mysterious voice from the phone, he bent down to return the poor guy's property. But suddenly the main hooligan accidentally confused the poor guy's head with a soccer ball and tried to take a powerful penalty. The bald guy was surprised and asked the local Ronaldo what he was doing. Apparently, Korean Cristiano was very angry about such a strange order from a stranger, so he continued to mint an imaginary ball. He also sent the caller to hell. The guy was so angry that he was not going to stop chasing an imaginary ball. His friends tried to stop him. telling him that the ball might deflate, but Kim could not be stopped. Some time passes and the course of events accelerates by several hours. The night is getting closer and closer. Korean Cristiano, having dealt with the poor fellow, goes somewhere into the distance holding the phone near his ear. Despite the fact that the recent football match we were watching had ended, the voice from the receiver continued to scold the main hooligan. He asked him why he should interfere with this particular family. In response to this, the bully did not hesitate for a second before answering. He called the poor fellow the son of a not very responsible woman, and moreover, a beggar. He also added that he also plans to play football with him. This bully also remembered the same girl with purple hair who suddenly appeared and who stopped the bullies from mocking our main character. He clearly wanted to thank her for this. So the conversation between these two unrecognized geniuses ended, and it clearly did not end on a good note. We could understand this from the expression on Kim's face. This hooligan intended, despite all the warnings, to turn our main character into a construction set. Apparently, he was an ardent fan of not only football, but also Lego. Events are again transferred back to our beloved protagonist. He is holding a phone in his hands with the same notification from the application Hell Rising. He is clearly in thought. Undoubtedly, any of us would be surprised to see this on the screen of our phone, and so, the main character behaved the same way as we would have behaved. He was dumbfounded. Lee Yoon took a closer look and assumed that this was a notification from some kind of game. But after taking a closer look, Lee Yoon thought that this game was very strange and unfamiliar to him. After our main character thoughtlessly pressed the purple beckoning button, a very ominous aura imbued with devilish energy appeared around him. Everything around Lee Yoon suddenly became very dark and gloomy. He did not understand what was happening right now and continued to stare at the screen of his phone. He was surprised by the suddenness. Suddenly, a very strong trembling ran through his entire body. This trembling was completely unusual, as if not from this world. However, in reality, nothing was happening around the young man in the real world. He simply stood rooted to the spot in the middle of the street and stared at the screen of his phone. These sensations were surprisingly felt not only by our hero, but also by his offender, who also felt a strange trembling and began to stand rooted to the spot. Perhaps he needed to eat less ketchup. On that very day, our poor fellow became a Sigma. He wondered if on that very day he would not have received this application. Would he have been able to remain human? Just the thought of this immediately brought tears to our protagonist's eyes. This application clearly had a very strong influence on Lee Yoon. After all, this very application turned our main character from an ordinary loser into a real Sigma. But who is covered in blood from head to toe, was it worth it? On that very day, Lee Yoon decided, despite all the possible consequences, to press the purple button to start. And it was from that moment that the night of the devil began. Suddenly, the guy's thoughts were interrupted by a girl with purple hair. She turned to him and asked the guy if he was coming, or if he was busy with something. The guy returned to the real world, looking at the girl. He was dumbfounded and did not know what to answer. The girl noticed that the guy was in a strange state, but he himself did not explain this. Over the past 18 years of the guy's life, poverty itself did not bring him much suffering. Everything around him was black and white. The guy tried every day to please his father, but his boyfriend, as you know, was not the best person in the world. However, all of Lee Yoon's attempts to please his father were in vain, and they always ended in failure because the father treated his son very badly. At that time, our main character had no time to think about such things as poverty and other things, because poverty was overshadowed by more serious problems. Having finally gotten used to the poor environment, Lee Yoon completely stopped paying attention to the situation in his house. He didn't care about it. Meanwhile, the course of events moves back to the present, in which Lee Yoon's newly acquired girlfriend was leading him to her home, and now they were already at the front doors. The doors opened and we saw these two standing on the threshold. The girl opening the door with her gaze invited Lee Yoon to go inside. When a guy saw the inside of the house of a girl he liked, he was amazed. After all, it was simply huge, and besides this, the interior of this house was probably more expensive than his entire old apartment. It was the first time for our poor man to see this. Watching the luxurious interior, the guy stood in a stupor because quite recently his thoughts were in his poor past, and what he saw now shocked him. After a while, after Lee Yoon had recovered slightly from the shock, the two walked further and sat down at the table and began to write something. Most likely, these two were doing homework that they were assigned at school. While Lee Yoon was fascinated by papers, the girl quietly began to sneak up to her sofa. Not much time passed before the girl, having changed her position, found herself lying on the sofa, and a pillow appeared under his head, and she was covered with a luxurious blanket. While So-hee was sleeping harmlessly on the sofa and probably contemplating her dreams, our protagonist continued to calmly do his homework while sitting at the table, never looking back. Suddenly, a guy with short black hair came into the house. Entering the house, he loudly announced to Yoon Soha that he was already home. Lee Yoon turned in surprise towards the recently entered guy. This guy was very attractive in appearance. In addition to this, he had very pale skin and a lot of jewelry. When he saw Lee Yoon, he was surprised that he was already here and greeted him. Lee Yoon also responded by greeting Jaehoon and explaining to him that he was visiting So-hee for a while to do a group math assignment together. Jaehoon was our main character's classmate, just like So-hee. Hearing Lee Yoon, the guy confirmed Lee Yoon's words, saying that So-hee really chose to do this work with him instead of him. Lee Yoon was surprised because he didn't know this. Jaehoon added that he would have done the same in her place. Looking at Saihan Jaehoon sleeping on the sofa, he was surprised that this girl invited 2 people to visit her and went to bed herself. Lee Yoon tried to justify her by saying that she was probably overtired and therefore decided to rest. Jaehoon would agree with Lee Yoon's theory if not for one nuance. Jaehoon wondered why So-hee asked him to bring a change of clothes. Suddenly, the guy wondered if this was the work of Kim Kwan. The guy even got confused for a while. Suddenly, Jaehoon approached Lee Yoon and, placing his hand on Lee Yoon's shabby jacket, asked him for forgiveness and promised him to try to be around more often so that this would not happen. At that moment, our main character, looking up at Jaehoon, realized that he was really a person with a kind soul. For Lee Yoon, this was surprising, because usually he was surrounded only by hooligans. Suddenly, Jaehoon handed Lee Yoon a bag of expensive clothes from a brand store and told him to take it and change clothes because his clothes were dirty. But the guy immediately refused such a generous offer, but Jaehoon stood his ground. After that, the guy with the irresistible appearance decided, whether as a joke or not, to offer So-hee to change Lee Yoon into new clothes without his knowledge, because if he leaves like that, they will worry. Judging by the picture in front of us, Lee Yoon still agreed to change clothes himself. Meanwhile, in his head, he assumed that these two were so ideal because they grew up in an ideal environment and continuous love. Having examined this huge, luxurious bathtub, Lee Yoon concluded that this bathroom alone was already larger than his entire house. He never ceased to be amazed at everything that he would see here. He also paid attention to the fact that they gave him things that were luxury. He wondered how much such things could cost, because he could not even think that he would ever wear them. The guy's curiosity got the better of him. Lee Yoon took out his phone and went to look for things from this store to find out the price. A 100% cotton sweatshirt from this brand cost a whopping 3 million won. Apparently, such a huge price for an ordinary sweatshirt really confused our poor man. He couldn't believe that things could cost such a lot of money. He once again began to compare everything he saw with his poor life. This time he thought about the fact that this sweatshirt alone in this package cost the same as the annual rent of his house. Taking that very expensive sweatshirt in his hands, the guy thought that if he added up all the clothes that he had since his birth, it would hardly amount to the cost of this sweatshirt alone. The guy still couldn't believe that these clothes really cost that much. He began to think that he simply couldn't wear something like that, because if he suddenly tore it or lost it, he would probably have problems. Holding that same sweatshirt in his hands, he stopped and turned to look in the mirror. He silently looked at himself and different thoughts ran through his head. He began to understand that, having experienced wealth for the first time in his life, he finally realized more clearly how poor he was. At that moment, that same luxurious mirror reflected Lee Yoon as an ordinary rat who suddenly found himself in a bright, luxurious mansion. Realizing this, the guy was haunted by thoughts of how poor and insignificant he was. He was also very jealous of these two, who grew up in pure love and live in a beautiful house. Before visiting this house, our main character thought that such houses only exist in movies. The guy dreamed of living in a very sunny place with a beautiful view of the sky. About a place where there is no evil father who constantly mocks you and tries to send you to a better world, and where you can do homework in the evenings with the lights on, because before Lee Yoon would not have understood such a dubious luxury. At this moment, the darkest fragments from his equally dark past flash through Lee Yoon's head. We observe a huge amount of garbage and scraps. But the main problem in the house of our main character was that same maniac father, because of whom the whole country hates our main character, even when he is innocent of anything. Lee Yoon wished with all his heart to forget the shame that comes at the moment when you take out a food card with a meager balance, and also to never remember these times. Our main character has always dreamed of being born a respected man, so that he could afford to play at least Minecraft. But all these luxuries were given only to the children of non-murderers. After Lee Yoon's flow of thought stopped for a while, he finally decided to put on these luxurious clothes. after which he went out into the corridor in which Sohee was waiting for him. A girl with purple short hair asked Lee Yoon if his new clothes fit well, and she also said that she would throw his dirty school uniform in the wash, because they would see each other again tomorrow anyway. At this moment, Lee Yoon looked very depressed, as if he had lost the guarantor in the Genshin Impact, but in fact he had not yet recovered from his dark memories. Lee Yoon always wanted to know more about the girl who helped him out so many times, and was by his side in difficult times, but despite this, he never asked her about it. But it was on this day that Lee Yoon gathered all his strength to say Soha's question. He asked Soka if she only cares about him out of pity. After that, silence fell between the two. However, Sohee did not remain silent for long, and instead Sohee immediately asked what he meant and what he was even talking about. Lee Yoon could not be stopped. That day he wanted to find out the truth. He asked her why she was doing this if he was just an empty place for her. Sohee, in turn, simply asked Lee Yoon why he got it. But a little later, she said that she could understand what he said. She told Lee Yoon that now she would be embarrassed, but she would still answer only once. Suddenly, Sohee, after a short silence, tells Lee Yoon that the reason she cares is because he's just awesome, and yes, you heard right, she really said that. Just like us, Lee Yoon was stunned by the answer he heard. At this time, Sohee continued to explain. She told him that he was treated unfairly and had to go through a lot. She also added that she most likely could not do this. She summed up what she said to herself by saying that despite all the terrible things that happened to Lee Yoon, he still remains an incredibly sincere person, bright and good-natured. Curling her hair, she told the guy that in order to be just like him, you need to be a very strong and tough person. Having said this, she asked if he understood what she said. Without waiting for our main character's answer, she added that Lee Yoon is different from the gray masses who are obsessed with luxury, appearance, and spending money. It was because of all this that Sohee liked our main character, who at the moment could not believe what the girl said and was in a stupor. The explanation for Lee Yoon's behavior was extremely understandable, because in his entire life, no one had ever said something like that to him. He knew that he was not brave enough to take the first step with Sohee, and this was generally too arrogant. But our main character, despite all this, simply could not stop loving Sohee. Meanwhile, the course of events moves to the dining table where everyone is already assembled, and there is a luxurious assortment of food on the table. After these three ate, they did not intend to call it a day. Instead, they went to the living room in which there was a huge plasma, on which they all watched a horror movie together. After this, probably the most wonderful evening in the life of our main character, they left the house to see off our lucky one. Having brought Lee Yoon to a certain point, they all said goodbye in unison. They were probably already near the house of our main character. Suddenly, these three's farewell to each other was interrupted by an unexpected notification from our main character's phone. Quickly picking up the phone, Lee Yoon saw that he had been sent a photo and the sender was unknown. He immediately decided to open the photo to see what was on it. The text of the message was extremely bad. The short message contained the short sentence, "Beware, they want to send you to the next world." And the attached photo depicted the same three hooligans who recently very much bothered our main character. In the middle, there was also that same Korean Cristiano Ronaldo. Taking a closer look at the photo, the guy was simply shocked because this photo was taken in a place very close to his home. They probably wanted to take him by surprise and send him to a better world. Meanwhile, the course of events is accelerating. It's already very deep night outside. Approaching the scene of events, we observe those same hooligans who are patiently waiting for their victim to play a football match with a ball as the head of our main character. All this time, these three hooligans are being watched by Lee Yoon, who hid behind a car very close by. He was clearly waiting for these hooligans to leave in order to safely get to his home. However, it was already 3 o'clock in the morning, and these three had no intention of leaving at all. Lee Yoon guessed that these hooligans would return to take revenge, but he never expected that he would have to see them right at his entrance. Lee Yoon didn't understand at all why these Genshin Impact haters were doing this in the middle of the night, and near his entrance. He didn't understand their actions because they could just catch him at school, as they usually do. Suddenly, Lee Yoon decided to leave his hiding place and go to the side, but the same main bully Kim Kwan-woo, who was talking to someone on the phone at that time, was walking towards him. Finding himself very close to our main character, Kim Kwan-woo scratched his head and answered someone on the phone that he didn't see Lee Yoon anywhere. They were clearly tired of waiting for him. Kim Kwan-woo suggested that Lee Yoon had already slipped away a long time ago, but his wards continued to look for him in this district. But everyone already doubted that he would really come. At that moment, Lee Yoon's heart was probably beating at an incredible pace and was ready to jump out, but he tried with all his might to remain calm in order to stay alive. Lee Yoon still managed to control himself, and after a few seconds, it seemed that he had almost managed to sneak away right from under Kim Kwan's nose. As soon as our main character had already moved a decent distance away from Kim Kwan, he was ready to exhale, but suddenly his phone made a sound and he received a notification. Lee Yoon immediately took out his phone, and quickly looking at the phone, he again saw the same invitation that said that some little devil was inviting him to that very hell-raising application. In front of him again was the same notification with an invitation. He was categorically against accepting this invitation because now was the most inopportune moment for this. Next, Lee Yoon made a lightning-quick decision to turn off his smartphone as quickly as possible so that it would not in any way prevent him from escaping from a place that was dangerous to his life. Turning off his phone, Lee Yoon turned back to see Korean Cristiano walking away somewhere with the confident gait of a JoJo fan. For some reason, instead of immediately continuing to confidently move away from Kim Kwan, Lee Yoon continued to look at the bully. And at that moment, the worst thing that could happen happened. Kim Kwan, or the Korean Ronaldo, decided to turn around sharply. He had the terrible eyes of a hunter. However, fortunately, our main character managed to escape using his innate prey skills. Instead of turning off, a voice was heard from the phone telling Lee Yoon not to turn off his phone. However, the luck of Lee Yoon, who had just escaped from mortal danger, did not end, because Kim Kwan turned back. He probably thought that he had imagined this sound. This time, instead of one notification from this strange notification, there was just a huge number of huge invitations to this game on the screen. Lee Yoon was shocked by this unexpected flow of notifications because he was sure that he had turned off his phone just recently. At this critical moment, Lee Yoon realized that nothing could save him and that if he did not take action, reprisals awaited him. He took his annoying phone and swung it to the side to throw it away. The throw was very accurate or not, it depends on whether Lee Yoon was aiming at the sewer. Nevertheless, the phone ended up there. A second later, the phone was already underwater, but the screen still emitted a confident purple glow, even while submerged in the water. But what happened next surprised Lee Yoon even more than everything that happened to him earlier, because he again heard the sound of a notification. Lowering his head to identify the source of the sounds, he looked at his pocket, which again contained the phone with this notification, which he had thrown into the sewer a second earlier. At this moment, Lee Yoon was confused, and the voice from the phone told him not to throw it away and continued to spam notifications. However, at that moment, Lee Yoon realized that this seemingly banal game was something beyond common sense. After this thought, Lee Yoon, after long resistance, accepted the invitation. After the invitation was accepted, a red, ominous skull appeared on the screen, and at the bottom there was a loading bar that was almost loading. When the download finished, an equally sinister little devil appeared on the phone screen, which was darker than the night. He introduced himself as in Little Devil, and was very glad that Lee Yoon was finally here. Next, he told Lee Yoon that he had a very difficult day, because the workshop called Hell, which he ran, was destroyed. The little imp continued his speech by inviting Lee Yoon to play his game and help him put the workshop back in order. In return, he promised Lee Yoon an impressive reward. Lee Yoon, immersed in the game process, completely forgot what situation he was in real life. Meanwhile, the little imp suggested Lee Yoon start his game with training, as is done in almost all other games. Meanwhile, right behind Lee Yoon, that same bully Kim Kwan suddenly appeared and looked at him with a terribly intimidating look. He was clearly ready for a football match like last time. A few moments later, our main character found himself in a very disadvantageous position, being pressed against the car behind which he was hiding, while Kim Kwan, on the contrary, was already swinging his hand to deliver a powerful blow. A moment later, Kim Kwan-woo already began to kindly brush Lee Yoon's teeth with a toothbrush, because our main character probably forgot to do this in the morning, so the kind hooligan decided to help him. After the bully finished brushing Lee Yoon's teeth, he was carefully laid on the asphalt, and after that, Cristiano Ronaldo began to play football with an imaginary ball, so improvise friends. However, Lee Yoon was apparently not in the mood to play football, so after a hard game, he tried to move away from the bully, but it was very difficult for him to move due to the very difficult fate of the soccer ball. Further, after Lee Yoon sat down on his knees to rest, Kim Kwan again helped our main character because apparently there was a beetle on his hair, which the guy with black hair kindly removed again. After this, Cristiano Ronaldo, of Korean origin, motivated Lee Yoon to return to training, because this is the only way to become real champions. But despite Kim Kwan-woo's excellent football playing skills, he had an extremely mediocre reaction, which is why he did not notice the car that was approaching him at great speed, so look around before crossing the road. Then the car kindly met with the athletic body of Kim Kwan. The meeting was very unexpected, which is why Kim Kwan decided to relax lying on the asphalt and looking at the beautiful starry sky that opened up for him while lying down. After the driver completed the fateful meeting, he did not hesitate and immediately left the crime scene at high speed. Meanwhile, the voice of the imp came from the phone again, notifying Lee Yoon that a human soul was required to revive the hellish workshop. After that, the guy took the phone with the application in his hands and heard from the imp that he helped him with his first victim. But from now on, Lee Yoon must hunt them on his own. That day, Lee Yoon did not understand much about the madness that had happened, but he had never felt such strong confidence. Meanwhile, the application from the phone began scanning the soul of the victim. Further instructions from the devil informed Lee Yoon that now he could only photograph the victim to continue the operation. At that moment, Lee Yoon could only press the button to get involved in this game, but that day he followed these instructions. After the flash of the phone's lens flashed, Lee Yoon knew that from that moment there would be no turning back. As it turned out later, this application of the devil led Lee Yoon to a rather disastrous result, because giving such a powerful weapon to the poor fellow, who had been bullied for many years, obviously would not have led to anything good. After Lee Yoon took a photo of Kim Kwan, he immediately began to be transported to the hellish application of our protagonist. All sorts of devils appeared out of nowhere and began to surround him. After the offender Lee Yoon was taken to the other world by the devils, Lee Yoon knelt down and cried out of hopelessness, because what had just happened had a very strong impact on him. Suddenly, unexpectedly from the application, again hearing the voice of the little devil already familiar to us, he praised the guy and suggested that next time he could handle it himself. He added that they call scanning a sacrifice. For this you need to meet 3 conditions. The first condition is that the victim must be completely incapacitated and immobilized. For this you can stun the victim in various ways or tie him up. Secondly, you need to make sure that the future victim is sufficiently frightened and experiences a sufficient level of fear. If one of the 3 conditions was not met, or the scanning victim lost consciousness, then the scanning would not be successful. And the last condition was the distance. The photo must be taken from a distance of up to 3 meters. If all these 3 points are met, then the devil's team will do the rest, as they did just now. While the scanning of the first victim was in progress, the imp suggested to Lee Yoon that he allow him to provide his precious, devilish, infernal workshop. In this hellish workshop, many interesting items are produced that can later be used in the world of the devil. That is, they are thus unlocked for our main character. The little devil continued by saying that his workshop used to be a wonderful place, but now it has become dilapidated. The number of conveyors, as well as goods and clients, has significantly decreased. However, despite all the losses, all is not completely lost, because with the help of Lee Yoon, the little devil will be able to return his workshop to its former greatness. Next, the imp voiced to his new owner the places that are now available to Lee Yoon. These places were a work office, the devil's chambers, a dungeon, and a store. Meanwhile, our main character was once again in a shocked state, but he continued to carefully follow all the instructions of the little devil from the devil's application. After some time, Lee Yoon decided that the first place he would want to visit in this devilish application would be the devil's chambers. Having decided that, he pressed the button with his finger. Next, the modest chambers of that same imp were displayed on the screen. The imp was embarrassed and introduced his room. He also said that if Lee Yoon wants to talk or ask something, he can look here at any time. The little imp was very irritated by the annoying eyes of various flowers that loomed near his bed. He began to drive them away. Meanwhile, the scanning of the first victim was completed, and the imp advised Lee Yoon to follow him to another place. Lee Yoon clicked on the icon that appeared on the screen. Next, we move to a location already familiar to us, unless of course you forgot the beginning of this video. A location called a dungeon. In this part of the application, we are looking at a large number of slots, but out of the great variety of slots, only 4 slots are available to us, one of which is already occupied by Kim Kwan-woo. Meanwhile, the imp explains that after scanning a victim, it is automatically moved to a free slot in the dungeon. He also explains the number of slots, as there are currently only 4 cameras available, but the number can be increased with enough fear and desperation points. After these explanations, Lee Yoon followed to the first slot in which his first victim was located. The imp also supported the adventure of moving into the colorful chamber. However, instead of Kim Kwan-woo, in the colorful camera of the application there was only some kind of mass of red color. Lee Yoon was impressed by this, to which the little devil was surprised at his faint-heartedness, after which he censored this fragment. The little devil explained this misunderstanding by saying that during scanning, the workers' devil wards first eat their victim, and then they spit it out. At least I hope that they spit it out. The little imp suggested that Lee Yoon learn how to restore these masses. However, after this very unpleasant episode, Lee Yoon could not stand it and dropped his phone from his hands, sending it into a free fall straight onto the asphalt. Lee Yoon held his head and began to think about the fact that he made Kim Kwon like this simply by photographing him lying down. He was stunned by this and still couldn't believe it. The guy tried to reassure himself that all this was impossible and completely unthinkable. He fixed his gaze on the sky and tried to understand what to do next, and what he should do now. At first he thought that he should immediately tell someone about what happened, but he immediately abandoned this idea, because from this he would face guaranteed consequences. Suddenly, Lee Yoon suddenly remembered that before Kim Kwon-woo noticed him behind the car, he had been talking to someone on the phone all the time, after which he turned around and began to look for the phone with his eyes. Having found the same phone of Kim Kwon, Lee Yoon rose to his feet and followed in his direction to pick up the phone from the floor. Next, Lee Yoon, without hesitation, quietly brought Kim Kwon's phone to his ear, and without saying anything, listened to the person who was talking to him. After some time, the silence stopped, and a voice from the phone asked Kim Kwon-woo what was going on there. The interlocutor suggested that all this time, Kim Kwon-woo was playing football with the head of our main character. Suddenly, we switched to the one who was talking on the phone with Kim Kwon all this time. All this time, it was the same guy with a good appearance, and the one who, according to Lee Yoon, was just a wonderful person. Suddenly, he realizes that it is Lee Yoon-woo who is standing on the phone now. However, our main character is so stunned at this moment that he cannot let a single word come out of his mouth. Meanwhile, the guy tells Lee Yoon that he is smart, so there is no point in pretending not to hear because he already understands everything. Lee Yoon continues to remain silent, but not because he is afraid, but because he continues to be in a state of severe shock. Meanwhile, the guy on the other end tells Lee Yoon that he liked to remain in the shadows all this time. And at that moment, the very piece of the puzzle that haunted our main character appeared, and the puzzle came together. After all, the bullying began from the very day when Ji-hoon explained that Lee Yoon was the son of a murderer. Meanwhile, the vile Ji-hong continued his speech. He told him that deprived children like him cannot live otherwise than to study, run away, endure, and flounder. At that moment, Lee Yoon was simply overwhelmed with terribly dark emotions, and it was as if a small piece of hell was forming around him, because what he heard from someone whom he considered a kind person plunged him into shock. Ji-hoon, being in a huge luxurious house, laughed loudly, calling people like Lee Yoon worthless insects who don't even realize their insignificance. Laughing, he even felt a little sorry for them. Ji-hoon did not stop laughing and continued to call people like our main character simple cockroaches who study well and insects who simply live on his scraps. All this time, Lee Yoon silently listened to all this dirt. Having stopped laughing, this scoundrel again called our main character smart, and also immediately said that it was for this reason that he probably knew what would happen to him if he told So-hee everything. After Ji-hoon re-warned Lee Yoon about what would happen to him if he told So-hee, he thanked him for his assistance and said goodbye by hanging up, while the stunned Lee Yoon stood broken but with an incredible weapon in his hands. After some time, Lee Yoon again took out his phone on which the Hellish Workshop application was open. The little devil who had been waiting all this time met Lee Yoon and asked if they could continue. However, Lee Yoon first interrupted the imp's speech by telling him that he wanted to ask something. The little imp kindly inquired about what Lee Yoon wanted to ask. Next, Lee Yoon asked the imp a question that interested him, but unfortunately we did not find out what exactly Lee Yoon asked at that moment. Meanwhile, the guy looked towards his entrance and realized that the other hooligans were still waiting for him, so he decided that the best solution would be to leave here. Next, Lee Yoon took out his phone with the application open and told the little imp that everything that happened here was most likely filmed and he doesn't know whether passers-by saw him. The little imp was surprised that Lee Yoon was worried about this. After a while, the little devil laughed and asked Lee Yoon not to worry, because he was protecting him. He explained the situation by saying that no one would be able to see the training situation. Next, the little devil took out a coupon that depicted professionals who are engaged in deleting recordings from cameras and video recorders. The little devil reassured the guy by saying that he would send the video to them and they would take care of it all. Surprised, Lee Yoon asked the imp if this was really possible, to which the imp deftly responded by asking Lee Yoon that recent events also seemed impossible to him. Suddenly, the little imp changed the topic of conversation, asking Lee Yoon to listen to him, and then asked him if he realized the significance of their chance meeting. Our main character, standing on the street and carefully looking at the phone screen, listened to the little devil, and he in turn said that from now on he will be the most special person in this world. The little devil also continued that now the most important thing for him is to listen to him, and he in turn will give him everything, including unimaginable amounts of money, power, and any appearance. Having shown on the display everything that he can offer, the imp summed up the rewards by saying that he can give him everything. His imagination is enough for him. The little imp also told Li Yun that he should forget about the stupid and crappy hierarchy of people, because from now on he will become much better than all these people. After all, from now on our main character, thanks to a mysterious diabolical application, will be outside the rules of this stupid world. The little devil didn't just say this, but promised to give his word. Meanwhile, we return back to the dungeon location. The imp calls Li Yun to revive Quan, because in this state he is very sad and nothing can be done about him. After awkward actions performed by the imp, the remains of Kim Kwan-woo are scattered throughout the entire location. Even Kim Kwan-woo's life streak was scattered into pieces. While the little devil was busy putting Kim Kwan in order, he suggested that he not waste time, but instead look at the assortment of the devil's store. Li Yun did just that by clicking on the store icon on the left. After a short download, we move to the store of hell, inside of which there is a shop devil who asks Li Yun how he can help him, and to the right of him there are 2 available buttons out of 4, on which it says buy and sell. Seeing another little imp, Li Yun is surprised, thinking that this is the same little imp, but the little imp does not understand what Li Yun is talking about, even though in fact, all this time, it is the same little imp. However, the imp continues to play the role of a new imp, and pulls out a memorable gift from under the table, as a sign of their acquaintance, and hands it towards Li Yun. Having unpacked the gift, Li Yun sees its contents. It contains 2 potions, a potion of oblivion and a potion of resurrection, after which the little imp invites our main character to look around the store. Li Yun accepts the imp's invitation and opens the assortment of the imp's store, in which we observe 15 interesting artifacts, but so far we do not know their properties. From the rich variety of different items, Li Yun becomes interested in a mysterious key that is located right in the middle of the store's inventory. Then he decides to click on it. By clicking on the key of hell, its description opens to him. Its properties are quite simple, but it costs a very significant amount of in-game currency. Its essence lies in the fact that it allows you to personally enter the game of the rise of hell. The properties of this artifact greatly surprise our protagonist, but for now they do not interest him, which is why he abandons the idea of buying it. Next, Li Yun is attracted by a skull with deer antlers that is shrouded in blue flame. It also has a high price, but in return it can tell educational stories and will not let you get bored. Reading the descriptions of this skull, Li Yun definitely didn't like it. He also refuses the idea of buying it. At this moment, the guy does not understand the code of this game at all. Having refused the second item, Li Yun again goes into the store's assortment, and this time opens an item called the Devil's Card. It has a low price, but allows you to use in-game currency in the real world. After studying the description of this item, this artifact, unlike the previous 2, was extremely interested in our main character, judging by his surprise. Looking somewhere up, Li Yun wondered whether it could really be possible to withdraw game money into real currency. Apparently, he really liked it. Next, the guy begins to study in more detail the 3 currencies that are available to him in this game. At the moment, he has 100 fear, 100 pain, and 0 despair points. Li Yun is very alarmed by such creepy names of the in-game currency, but he consoles himself with the fact that these may just be names. Further, our main character still assumes that this game is really diabolical, and everything that happened to him just recently is all true. However, Li Yun didn't see much point in thinking about it on his own, but he understood that most likely he got involved in something very dangerous and something very mysterious. Sitting alone and thinking about the essence of this game, the guy finally decided that at the moment the most correct decision would be to return to the dungeon and find out about this game in more detail. The guy did just that. Returning to the application interface to the devil, he saw how he, in turn, had been collecting Kim Kwan all this time, and at that moment he finally finished. Tired from lifting the very heavy Kim Kwan, who was in the basin, the little devil asked Li Yun if he had brought a gift from the store. Next, the little devil pointed to the side at the icon with a drawn chest and asked the guy to open his inventory to take out the contents of the gift from the store. Having opened the inventory, we observed the very 2 potions that we received from the gift. The little devil pointed to the resurrection potion and announced that now they will use it on Kim Kwan. All that was left to use this potion was to simply drag it with your finger into the dungeon and use it, and this is what the little devil ordered our main character. Li Yunwoo, strictly following the instructions as he said, transferred the resurrection potions and was ready to give them to Kim Kwan-woo, who was clearly not in the best shape. However, suddenly Li Yun stopped for a moment before giving Kim Kwan a drink. Something clearly confused him very much. Holding his head with both hands, he again lost understanding of what was happening right now. He did not understand what kind of nonsense was happening in this game and did not understand how to play it. He also didn't understand how he should give the resurrection potion to this shapeless mess that doesn't even have a mouth. But after a while, Li Yunwoo still dared to try to use the resurrection potion. He simply took the potion and poured it directly onto the red shapeless mess. Apparently he did everything right, because immediately after the contents of the potion touched this porridge, a visual effect immediately appeared, which indicated the effective use of the potion. A couple of moments later, Kim Kwan-woo literally began to reassemble from a shapeless mess like a Lego set. First his heart appeared, and then his skeleton flew up. The process went very quickly, and in a couple of seconds, Kim Kwan-woo was already completely collected. He looked at his hands, and he clearly had no idea where he was now. After a few seconds, Kim Kwan-woo looked dumbfoundedly towards the display, and the little devil, contentedly pointing his finger at him, notified Li Yun that the potion had worked, and Kim Kwan-woo had been completely resurrected. At this moment, Kim Kwan-woo was completely at a loss, and horror could be read very clearly in his eyes, and the little devil announced that from now on, Li Yunwoo could use him in any way he wanted. The little devil told Li Yun that he could do literally anything. From taking life to returning life, he could also make sure that Kim Kwan could not die. At this moment, although stunned, Li Yun began to remember all the insults that Kim Kwan caused him, all the times he mocked him and caused him physical and mental pain for many years. While Li Yun was overwhelmed with a wide variety of and sometimes even very terrible thoughts, the little imp summed up everything he said by saying that Li Yun is now literally a god for Kim Kwan-woo. And so the training in the devil's game continued. The imp, appearing before Li Yun, told him that right now, he would teach him how to develop fear, pain, and despair. Kim Kwan-woo sat trembling in the basin, while the imp told Li Yun that in order to continue his training, he needed to change his victim's clothes. After Li Yun opened the next menu that was in his arsenal, he saw a large number of settings and indicators for Kim Kwan. The imp explained that in this window he can check the condition of the victim and change various parameters. Pointing to the lower slots, the little devil explained that these slots are intended specifically for Kim Kwan's clothes. To dress Kim Kwan-woo in any clothes that Li Yun wants, you just need to swipe your finger and the clothes will magically change directly to Kim Kwan-woo. After our main character listened to the imp's instructions and swiped his finger to the side, Kim Kwan-woo quickly changed into a ridiculous pink bunny costume with a plush carrot, and there were candies and confetti around him. Swiping his finger to the side again, Kim Kwan-woo's clothes magically changed again. This time, Kim Kwan-woo was wearing a fancy princess dress. This time, the process of changing the costume was also accompanied by confetti. Next, the little devil asked Li Yun which of the costumes he saw he liked best, but the guy replied that he would stop at the most ordinary one. The little devil was surprised and instead offered to look at the dancer's colorful costume. Then 3 currencies appeared around the imp, and he began to explain that in the world of the devil, they use human fear, pain, and of course, despair as currency. With these 3 fundamental currencies in the world of devils, Li Yun can buy almost anything he wants, but for example, they are not suitable for special actions such as improving the workshop. After these same 3 currencies evaporated into thin air, the imp told Li Yun that now was not quite the time to think about it. He also said that he would explain everything to him when the certain time comes. Next, the imp raised the red curtain behind which Kim Kwan was hiding. Now they had to master the main and most important way to earn in-game currencies. After that, the imp asked Li Yun to click on the very last icon with a drawn devil, which was currently emitting purple light. After Li Yun opened the very icon that he was asked to open, he simply could not believe what he had just seen before his eyes. After all, at that moment, a not complete but very frightening arsenal of a variety of weapons opened in front of him, which were all available to Li Yun right at that moment. But now these 2 settled on the hand tool. Li Yunwoo immediately began to try out this tool called a hand to lift Kim Kwan upside down. Meanwhile, the little devil explained that this is a basic hand tool, but despite this, it is very versatile. For the most banal purposes, this tool made it possible to take the victim by some part of the body and, spinning it, throw it into the wall, thereby earning a certain amount of currency called pain. In addition to the fact that this tool could be thrown, it could even tickle the victim or even twist some limbs. This tool was the little devil's favorite tool, but others, according to him, were also very funny. Next, the little devil was ready to demonstrate a tool called a blow, with the help of which Li Yun had access to such methods of inflicting pain as the ability to hit, kick, choke, and pinch. All the actions that the little devil just performed for the purpose of training Li Yun brought Kim Kwan pain, and thereby earned Li Yun a currency called pain. The little imp intended right now to give an example of how it works in more detail. Next, the little devil really demonstrated the methods of mutilation and asked Li Yun if he could see how the indicators of fear and pain were gradually increasing. He also added that according to this principle, a person extracts skin and meat from livestock. The little devil continued to explain to Li Yun that the more fear and pain his first victim experiences, the more corresponding currency he receives. Li Yunwoo, watching Kim Kwanwoo being bullied and beaten, expected to see strong resistance and uncontrollable rage. But at that moment, the bully cried in front of him for the first time in his life, thereby showing his weakness. Li Yunwoo is again transported in his head to his dark past. He was bullied in the same way as Kim Kwanwoo was now being bullied, but this time everything is exactly the opposite. Now Kim Kwanwoo is a helpless victim. Suddenly, the imp's bullying of the victim temporarily stopped. The imp explained to our main character that Kwanwoo was less sensitive to stimuli. Most likely this was so because of his rather strong physique. But this was not a problem, because the characteristics of each victim are unique, as is the fear of a particular tool. This meant that tools with the fear parameter could give 150% more currency, and with the phobia parameter even 300% more. Now all that remained was to find out what Kim Kwan was afraid of. This was necessary to choose the most effective method of earning one of the 3 devilish currencies. Each time listening to the explanations and watching Kim Kwan-woo act as a victim, our main character temporarily returned to the past, remembering dark episodes from his life, how he was constantly mocked by the same Kim Kwan-woo. He also recalled individual remarks from Kim Kwan about how after much mockery he was becoming less and less happy because Li Yun was already getting used to it and stopped reacting to the beating. Instead of stopping the bullying, these hooligans only thought about what they could do to squeeze the emotions out of the poor fellow, what new ways to come up with, how to cause harm. Suddenly, a terrifying black spider appeared in Li Yun's mind, which was clearly capable of striking fear into the hearts of those who were afraid of spiders. The spider appeared in the mind of our main character for a reason, because right now Kim Kwan-woo was right in front of the huge spider, while the imp began to introduce Kim Kwan-woo to his cuter friend. In addition to the terrible huge black spiders and the assortment of the hellish world, there were also huge scary snakes. The imp happily informed Li Yunwoo about this, and the snakes, in turn, were precisely the fear of Kim Kwan. But besides cute snakes, Kim Kwan-woo was terribly afraid of spiders. But fortunately, in the hellish world, there were not just spiders, but giant spiders that were able to earn even more fear points for Kim Kwan-woo. If you think that in the great assortment of hell there were only giant spiders and no less giant snakes, then you are mistaken. Because right now, Kim Kwan-woo was a few meters away to get acquainted with an equally adorable chainsaw. Suddenly, for the first time in a long time, Kim Kwan-woo finally spoke. He turned to Li Yun and apologized to Li Yun, saying that he was truly an asshole. He continued to apologize in the hope that this hell would end for him if Li Yun forgives him. Kim Kwan-woo simply could not stop begging for the forgiveness of our main character. He agreed that he deserved terrible things, but still asked for forgiveness so that he would be released from this hell. And now Li Yunwoo returns to the dark episodes of his memories. He remembers how he cried, and also asked for forgiveness from the hooligans so that they would stop creating real hell for him. Li Yunwoo recalled these terrible episodes exactly to the smallest detail, how he was on his knees in the toilet while Kim Kwan-woo imagined that his head was a soccer ball. He also asked for forgiveness and begged to stop, just like Kim Kwan-woo in the present tense. During these terrible moments in the past, Li Yunwoo constantly imagined himself sending this bully to a better world tens of thousands of times. But he could never have accomplished this in the real world because he was a nobody. And now in the real world, Li Yunwoo, holding his phone in his hands, watched Kim Kwan-woo, who was wounded, and there were terrifying weapons of damage around him. He begged Li Yunwoo to stop this. Much to the surprise of our main character, seeing this pain and suffering in reality turned out to be much more difficult than he could have imagined. Further, the dumbfounded Li Yunwoo, who did not know what to do, watched as the imp mocked the man who ruined his life every day in various ways. The imp was ready to deprive him of his tongue, to place a terrible spider in his own stomach. It was very difficult for Li Yun to watch these acts of horrific cruelty on the part of the imp, but he didn't even know what he was feeling at that moment. Did he enjoy the torment of his offender? Despite the uncertainty of our protagonist's feelings, dark episodes from his life continued to persistently visit him. He recalled how, being beaten, he lay in tears, while this satisfied gang of hooligans simply left him on the ground like trash. But despite all the flashback episodes that our main character remembered, he could not continue to watch how horribly Kim Kwan was being bullied. He sharply shouted to the little imp to stop doing what he was doing. The little imp stopped but was clearly perplexed by such a strange order from Lee Yoon. Kim Kwan-woo was most likely no less surprised. Lee Yoon-woo explained his request by saying that what the little imp was doing was too cruel and beyond common sense, so he should stop doing it. The little imp, hearing this, was extremely surprised by such an unusual request. He immediately asked Lee Yoon if he had come to terms with what Kim Kwan had been doing to him all this time, because Lee Yoon had only recently been plunged into the dark episodes of his past. However, our main character immediately responded negatively, saying that his humility had nothing to do with it. He continued by saying that he asked to stop due to the fact that it had already gone too far and went beyond the limits. However, the little devil continued to convince Lee Yoon that he was in vain in asking him to stop. He made the argument that any person would start begging to forgive him if he had a chainsaw near his face. The little imp, holding the benzoyl on edge, informed Lee Yoon that if Lee Yoon continues to fall for Kim Kwan's pathetic deceptions and completely frees him, then he will not live a day. The little devil also reinforced what he said by saying that if Lee Yoon really falls for Kim Kwan-woo's deception and releases him, then Kim Kwan-woo will take Lee Yoon's life in the first 5 minutes of his release. However, Kim Kwan-woo, having heard that he could be released, began to try to convince Lee Yoon that everything that the little devil was saying was not true, because he was really very sorry and would never do that. Kim Kwan-woo did not retreat from making excuses. He stood on his feet, pressed his hands against the display, and convinced Lee Yoon-woo that now that he had experienced similar bullying himself, he understood what he had been doing all this time. Kim Kwan-woo apparently really felt a sense of despair, because while slowly sliding down, he continued to say that he realized how painful it was for Lee Yoon-woo. Kim Kwan-woo began to give an inspiring speech that despite the fact that he does not deserve forgiveness, he still asks to be given a second chance. And before he could finish his speech, he skyrocketed. This sudden flight was the work of the little devil. After the bully fell silent, the little devil asked Lee Yoon-woo what would happen if they switched places now. He clearly hinted that this bully would not show an ounce of mercy. Suddenly, the little devil asked Lee Yoon what was in common between his world and Lee Yoon's real world. Without waiting for an answer, he replied that at the top of the two worlds there are winners who tear others to shreds. The little imp continued his speech by saying that Lee Yoon-woo has been a victim and a loser all this time, but from now on the little imp will not leave him and will help him get out and become the strongest. Meanwhile, Kim Kwan-woo hung silently. We only watched his legs, he was probably riding on a swing now. The little devil, meanwhile, continued to tell Lee Yoon that with him, he would become a winner who would get everything he wanted. To do this, Lee Yoon should only strictly follow the orders of the little devil and do as he tells him. In return, he will receive greatness. When the huge chainsaw was at Kim Kwan's feet, the little devil informed Lee Yoon-woo that all he had to do now to achieve success was just to swipe his finger on the screen. For a while, Lee Yoon-woo was hesitant to do a regular swipe, but the little imp encouraged him, saying that he should just cast aside all his doubts and do it for his success. A moment later, the familiar notification interface appears on the screen, asking whether Lee Yoon-woo really wants to use the chainsaw. Suddenly, the course of events is interrupted, and we again, most likely judging by the color scheme, move into the past of our main character. In an episode of his past, we observe a gray mass consisting of many houses of the same type. Next, we observe the silhouette of a person, because a person is the result of his own choices, which are made throughout his life, and this is how a person is formed. And even the most insignificant change can absolutely everything that you are. In the background, we see the very house in which our main character lived, and in the background, his father can be seen. It was at this moment, which in Lee Yoon's opinion could clearly greatly influence him as a person, made him think seriously before committing an action. So he simply sat on the bench and memories flashed before his eyes. These words were not accidental, because the author of these words about the influence of any human choice was the elder brother of our main character, who was depicted in a framed family portrait. Lee Yoon-woo's older brother, like Lee Yoon-woo himself, constantly endured various bullying from his father, and instead of realizing his dream, he simply sought to earn a living. But his life ended abruptly when at the age of 22, he fell into a smelter. After this fall, he was instantly dissolved in boiling molten iron. In the next episode, we watch as Lee Yoon-woo and his father are already standing near the grave of this very brother of our main character. The reason for his retirement was the collapse of outdated safety equipment, which ultimately led to the rapid end of the life of his older brother Lee Yoon-woo. If a human life was worth more than $1,000,000,000 enterprise, then the second brother, always first in the student rankings, would never in his life go to work at the factory for the sake of Lee Yun-woo. The elder brother always repeated one thing. He said that they should live a good life and let neither money nor fame nor anything ever make us hurt others. But alas, Lee Yun-woo at that moment simply could not agree with the words of his brother, no matter how much he wanted it, because the realities of this world are too cruel. But Lee Yun-woo was still tormented by doubts as to whether this would really be right. However, despite the fact that right now he just needed to swipe in the direction, Lee Yun-woo turned away, because he simply could not just give a damn about his brother's words and act so cruelly. Next, Lee Yun-woo addressed the imp, saying that he was asking him to torture a defenseless person for money, but no matter how much he needed money, it was too inhumane. And he just can't play that game anymore. The little imp, in slight shock, asked Lee Yun-woo whether he was really going to give up everything he was offering him right now, all the greatness and all the bonuses. And most importantly, is Lee Yun-woo really giving up the chance to become the only special person in the world? The only one who has the mighty power to rule the Hell Workshop. The imp continued to try to convince Lee Yun to stay. He asked him if he really wanted to return to that life in which he had to eat leftovers and endure beatings and bullying every day. However, after listening to all these troubles from the lips of the little devil, Lee Yun-woo confidently, albeit after a brief silence, answered that he was confident in his answer and would not change his decision. However, this assertive little devil was not going to give in at all. Raising his tone, he began to say that even if he, as the son of a murderer, becomes an adult and studies and works until he is completely exhausted. Still, Kim Ji-hoon, the grandson of the head of the conglomerate, and Kim Kwon-woo, the son of the landlord in Gangnam, will wipe their feet on him throughout their lives and continue to constantly mock him. Hearing this dirty speech from the imp, Lee Yun-woo was forced to agree with what was said because it was the truth. But remembering Soki, whom he fell in love with so much, albeit in a short time, he was firmly convinced that not everyone was the same scum as them. Only Soha's existence helped Lee Yun understand that not all people are the same in relation to him. The little imp was obviously very angry when he heard such an answer. He began to gnaw his tail and was amazed at how stupid Lee Yun-woo was, because he gave him such a chance to become a great man with incredible power. However, the little devil did not continue to try to persuade Lee Yun to stay. Instead, he went berserk and left Lee Yun with his decision, saying that besides him, there are still billions of people who can also use this program. Turning away from Lee Yun, he added that weaklings and losers like him only ever deserve to miss opportunities like this. With each phrase the imp said, the application interface began to glitch more and more, and finally the imp told Lee Yun that he should remember his words very carefully. After all, much less time will pass than he might think, and he will immediately regret missing out on such a good offer. Immediately after the imp finished his farewell speech and the application interface completely disintegrated into glitches, suddenly a huge Kim Kwon-woo jumped out of the small screen of Lee Yun-woo's iPhone and was mutilated. Kim Kwon-woo landed rather hard on the asphalt, but he clearly had no time for that, because just recently he had literally been in a small hell. At that time, Lee Yun-woo looked in surprise at the hooligan lying on the ground. After Kim Kwon-woo had slightly recovered from the hell he had experienced, he knelt down trying to breathe in and out. Lee Yun-woo came up to him and told him to start breathing under control. However, to Lee Yun's surprise, Kim Kwon-woo couldn't just start breathing. Instead, he began to choke heavily and nothing helped him at all. The guy assumed it was because of shock, but after a while, he realized that he needed to do cardiopulmonary resuscitation. To begin with, Lee Yun knelt down and put his hands on Kim Kwon's chest and began to attempt chest compressions in order to help the bully breathe again and stay alive. After Lee Yun-woo cleared his airway, he tried to remember what to do next, but looking at the bully's head, he most likely remembered the next step. Looking at Kim Kwon's mouth, he realized that he now needed to perform artificial respiration in order to try to return life back to the bully's body. However, our main character was clearly in no hurry to perform such confident and very specific actions in this position. Instead, he tried to help Kim Kwon by attempting repeated cardiac massage. Lee Yun's attempts to bring back to life the bully who had mocked him and humiliated him in every possible way for many years bore fruit, because after some time and with the help of a heart massage, Kim Kwon-woo finally opened his eyes and returned to consciousness. Returning to consciousness, he saw how all this time Lee Yun-woo, whom he constantly mocks, is trying to drag this thug somewhere despite such a big difference in weight and physique. Kim Kwan-woo looked at his rescuer in surprise, while our main character told him that he would take him to the nearest hospital so that they could help him finally come to his senses. The guy continued to explain that all this time while the bully was unconscious, he tried in every possible way to help him. But the mini-market was closed, and his phone did not open, so he could not call an ambulance. He only had the option of taking him to the hospital. At that moment, Kim Kwan-woo remembered all those moments when he caused unbearable pain to this guy, and he also remembered the constant mockery on his part. He was clearly truly ashamed of his deeds. This huge muscular bully was so shocked that for a long time he could not say a single coherent sentence, and all this time our main character continued to confidently move towards the hospital. After some time, Kim Kwan-woo slightly moved away from our main character to walk himself. At this time, Lee Yoon-woo was very surprised, because it was the first time he had seen him tremble so much. It was a real miracle that he did not go crazy. Suddenly, Lee Yoon-woo turned his gaze to the sky and realized that it was soon starting to get lighter. He was very surprised at how long the day had turned out to be. Too much had happened in these 24 hours. It was indeed very difficult for Lee Yoon to think, because a lot of incomprehensible things happened. His head simply could not process it all and completely stopped thinking normally. The most important moments of this past day flashed before his eyes: applications, a photograph of the victim, an imp, the rise of hell. When it was all over, it all seemed like a very strange dream. He did not understand what it was at all. And in general, this phone of our main character was already more than 7 years old at the moment, and such a strange event happened, so he clearly should have bought a Xiaomi and didn't worry. Lee Yoon also wondered when in his real world, events took place that went beyond all common sense and had devastating power that could greatly affect the world. The guy couldn't stop thinking about what happened, because so many things remain under the veil of secrets. But Lee Yoon was consoled by the thought that it was all over, so he shouldn't think about it. After all, over the past few days he had quite noticeably forgotten about his studies. Lee Yoon simply needed to make up for lost time in his studies, even sacrificing his sleep, because if he did not receive a scholarship, he would have to pay large sums for education, and all the guys had quite good academic performance. But suddenly the guy, looking at his phone, could not understand what was wrong with him, because no one in his place, after the events that had happened, would immediately think about studying. After all, having gone through such horrifying events, to continue to worry about grades and money, to put it mildly, is very strange, because quite recently, paranormal things happened that went beyond all limits of common sense. Suddenly, Lee Yoon-woo, thinking too much, touches some not very stable fat guy, who was clearly looking for trouble or a victim who could be mocked if something happened. This plump guy grabs Lee Yoon's clothes and immediately, in an attempt to show his dominance, verbally attacks him and accuses him of pushing him. Lee Yoon is at a loss. Our main character is not at all interested in conflicts, and all he is trying to do is put out the conflict by apologizing. But the fat guy was not happy with this situation, and he continued to attack Lee Yoon-woo. This fan of Genshin Impact simply could not keep up with our main character. He continued to attack him in every possible way, saying some lines that made little sense. He was probably just picturing himself in front of the girl. Then something very unexpected happened. A hooligan who constantly mocked our main character stood up for our poor guy. Grabbing the current offender by the hand and head, he stopped the fat guy. Taking control of this overweight bully, he heard this fat guy ask him what he was doing in a very rude manner. He also ordered Kim Kwan to immediately remove his hands from his precious hair. However, instead of listening to this bully, Kim Kwan-woo tightly grabbed this bully by his priceless hair, according to him, and gave a confident, technical sweep, sending this parody of the bully flying to his destination asphalt. As was to be expected, this pseudo-bully could not offer any resistance to the muscular Kim Kwan, and he really set off on an amazing flight. Most likely he did not even immediately understand what had just happened. Next, Kim Kwan-woo, or the Korean Cristiano Ronaldo, used a technique already familiar to us, using his opponent's head as an imaginary ball. Fortunately, he had already developed this technique on our main character, so he performed it brilliantly on this badass. Despite the fact that this overweight guy who was chasing Lee Yoon had already begun to apologize under the pressure of his foot, it was already difficult for Kim Kwan to stop, and he continued to reacquaint the sole of his sneaker with this guy's face. Despite the requests of the girl who was nearby and the request of the guy himself to stop, Kim Kwan-woo was not going to stop at all, because he already understood what it's like for victims when they are bullied. Unexpected turns in this manhwa never cease to amaze. Suddenly this beating is interrupted by Lee Yoon-woo himself, from whom this little brawl began. He asks Kim Kwan-woo to stop hitting this guy, saying that's enough. Surprisingly, Kim Kwan-woo listens to Lee Yoon's request to stop this brawl. He, with tears in his eyes, tells this fat guy to get out of here as quickly as possible, giving him a chance to escape. After Kwan gives the guy the opportunity to escape, he kneels down and does not understand what is happening. He is still very impressed by what happened to him recently, and Lee Yoon, standing behind, just silently watches him. The wounded Kim Kwan-woo, standing on his knees, turns his gaze upward, and the very events that recently happened in that same hell flash before his eyes. He remembers everything in the smallest detail. Suddenly another surprise happens. Kim Kwan-woo, still crying, turns towards Lee Yoon, and instead of taking revenge on him for everything that happened to him in this hell, he cries and asks for forgiveness, promising that he will no longer bully him. He can't stop crying and also can't believe that everything that happened to him in this hell is real. Honestly, it had a good effect on Kim Kwan-woo, because now he has started an arc in which he has no enemies. Holding his head with both hands, the terrifying episodes of recent events in hell could not leave him alone. He was sure that he was about to go crazy and stop understanding anything. He could not believe that all these bites were real. Suddenly, Kim Kwan's repentance is interrupted by a notification that around the turn, Kim Kwan's phone receives the same notification about inviting him to the game from that same little devil. This leaves absolutely no one indifferent. What will Kim Kwan do with this notification? What will happen next? At this moment, while Kim Kwan-woo is studying the notification that came to his phone, Lee Yoon-woo remembers the very words of the little devil that he will regret his leaving much faster than he can imagine. Stunned this time, Kim Kwan-woo looks at his phone and doesn't understand why his screen turned on by itself, because he didn't press anything and didn't even intend to do anything. Meanwhile, on the display of Kim Kwan's phone, a familiar little devil appears on the display of Kim Kwan's phone and greets the victim of hell. The little devil doesn't see the need to introduce himself because they already know each other. Due to the fact that these two already know each other, the little devil gets straight to the point. The little devil says so to Kim Kwan and informs him that they are skipping training and immediately moving on to the first quest, which is now about to be given out. Next, a notification appears on Kim Kwan's screen called a quest. The quest is that he needs to immobilize and scan Lee Yoon-woo. There is also a time limit of 20 minutes on the quest. If Kim Kwan doesn't have time, the little devil considers it a refusal and is looking for a new person. However, Kim Kwan-woo is not at all inclined to cooperate with this little imp. He tells him that he is not going to do anything for these pennies, but the little imp immediately interrupts him. The little imp tells the bully that if he has no problems with money, then he can tell him a lot more about the rewards that are offered to users of the Hell-Raising app. Next, the imp explains to Kwan that if he is in the game, he will be able to exchange currency for real money or improve the workshop, and subsequently receive talent, appearance, love, eternal youth, and even superpowers and resurrection. Next, the imp tells Kim Kwan that he is indeed better than the previous beggar user, but his life is not that significant because only poor people envy the landlord's son in Gangnam. The little devil clearly knows a lot about temptation. He goes on to say that people like Kim Jae-hoon and Yoon So-hee are much richer and better than him, so his life is not that significant. The little imp continues to put pressure on Kim Kwan, telling him that he is being ridiculed behind his back, saying that he is the same poor man who was just lucky. His parents invested millions in his education, but even Lee Yoon-woo's grade is still better. That's why he bullies weak school children. The little devil also touches on the topic of sports, because despite the fact that Kim Kwan-woo practices boxing and calls himself a boxer, in the eyes of real champions, he is just an ordinary person, of which there are already so many. The little devil continues to mentally break and put pressure on the guy, telling him that his parents have long been disappointed that they grew up with such a good-for-nothing son, and his first love likes Kim Jae-hoon. The little imp continues to mercilessly play with Kim Kwan's feelings, telling him that he himself understands that if he doesn't change anything in his life, he will one day end up at the feet of Lee Yoon and his ilk. It is for this reason that he is so actively engaged in tormenting and mocking others, to try to prevent himself from ending up at their feet, because he couldn't do otherwise. The little imp, holding a Kim Kwan doll in his hands, tells him to his face that he himself has not achieved anything in life, and everything that he now has is explained by the fact that he was simply lucky with his parents. His role is not here. The little devil sums up his speech by saying that if he does not interfere in his life, then he will have to live in this way until his death. At the end of his speech, the imp sets a condition. If he manages to complete the text on immobilizing Lee Yoon and imprinting him, then the imp will save him and give him greatness and everything he wants. While Lee Yoon-woo is trying to somehow sneak away so as not to end up in the game, the imp continues to mercilessly seduce Kim Kwan-woo with thoughts that they will watch Kim Jae-hoon fawn on him. The real devil living in Kim Kwan's display continues to motivate the guy to complete the quest as quickly as possible. He also adds that, together, they will be able to trample on the talent and efforts of special people. The little imp continues to say that with his help, he will not allow the likes of Lee Yunwoo to bypass him, and everyone will respect him, while Kim Kwan-woo, under the impression, watches Lee Yunwoo, who is trying to escape from him. After hearing all the privileges that were promised by the imp, Kim Kwon-woo looks at the fleeing Lee Yunwoo with the cold gaze of a hunter, and after that he quietly calls his name and then apologizes. The next moment, Kim Kwan-woo finds himself very close to Lee Yunwoo, who is about to be in his hands, and nothing will stop him from completing the quest and receiving the promised bonuses and privileges that were promised to him. After another moment, Kim Kwan-woo's hand is already overtaking Lee Yunwoo and takes him into a grip by his clothes. His gaze is full of coldness and no emotions are observed. In his head, there is only the goal of completing the quest. After the bully once again overtakes the victim Lee Yun, he throws him on the ground and prepares to complete the quest. Once on the ground, our main character begs Kim Kwan not to do this. Tears are already welling up in his eyes. However, maddened by the desire to gain power in this diabolical application, Kim Kwan-woo is already unstoppable. He only warns Lee Yunwoo that asking him to stop is useless, because even if his own parents were instead of him, he would not come to his senses. Our Kim Kwan didn't last long after the correctional hell, because he again returned to his previous state. He again beat our main character, who is not guilty of anything, saying that people like him are simply not spared in this world. At that moment before completing the quest, Kim Kwan-woo realized that for the application, the rise of hell can be used as a sacrifice for anyone. He understood that Lee Yunwoo is a kind person, but he also understood that in modern realities, this quality is useless. After Lee Yunwoo was completely immobilized, Kim Kwan-woo took out his phone and launched the camera and aimed at the immobilized body of our main character. Because at that moment, Kim Kwan-woo believed with all his heart. It was he and no one else who was entrusted with raising hell. With this thought a couple of seconds ago, he pressed the button to take a photo, and a flash followed. However, at that moment, Kim Kwan-woo did not take a photo of Lee Yunwoo, who was right in front of him, but he took a photo of himself. It was clearly the worst selfie of his life. The camera flash, which at that moment was supposed to illuminate Lee Yunwoo lying on the asphalt, at that moment illuminated and photographed Kim Kwan-woo. Literally, no one expected such a turn of events. At that moment, when poor Kim Kwan-woo again found himself sealed on the phone, or rather in the infernal application Hellrise, he finally realized that he had just been fooled by this little devil, but it was already too late. And it was at this moment of complete hopelessness that Kim Kwan-woo truly saw the abyss of his existence. At that moment, the owner of the hellish workshop earned 20 points of despair. Well, that's true. Meanwhile, Lee Yunwoo, who was lying on the floor, woke up and was extremely surprised that he was still in the real world. And very close to him was a phone in which the same application was open, and Kim Kwan-woo was sealed inside. Despair is one of the 3 fundamental currencies of hell. Unlike subconscious fear or pain, it is a more special emotion, since earning despair points is much more difficult than the other 2 currencies. It differs from the other 2 currencies in that it simply cannot be produced by simply physically torturing the victim. Special efforts must be made to earn it. If you take earning money from this currency seriously, and if you take into account all the personal characteristics of the victim that are available in the program interface, then you can reap the despair points in full. You can earn despair points to the point of completely breaking the victim's spirit and his psyche. You can earn despair by deceiving the victim, giving false hope, and then mercilessly destroying everything that is most valuable. Then a truly amazing thing happened. Lee Yun picked up the phone and heard congratulations from the imp. He congratulated him on completing his training. He also added that he would learn all the details about the game during the game itself. The little imp also did not forget to prepare a gift in honor of the completion of his training. The little imp asked to inspect the territory at his feet, because his gift was waiting for him there. Once again congratulating our main character on the completion of this tricky training, the little imp called on Lee Yun to build the greatest infernal workshop together. Exhausted, Lee Yunwoo reached for a beautifully wrapped gift, which actually turned out to be very close to Lee Yun lying on the asphalt. Lee Yunwoo was not in the mood to hesitate, so he quickly went to the gift and opened it and found there a whole stack of banknotes and another potion. However, it was difficult for Lee Yun to understand what emotions he felt after what happened to him in these 24 hours. Too many turns and difficult episodes happened to him. He asked only one question: why him? After all, in his opinion, cruel hooligans like Kim Kwan-woo are much better at managing this application than him, he didn't know why, so he asked the little devil himself. The little devil, in response to this question, only briefly answered that he does not choose who will manage the application, but it undoubtedly must be Lee Yun-woo. Otherwise, there is no other way. It was a foregone conclusion from the very beginning. At the end of his speech, the imp added that they are simply connected and nothing can be done about it. The imp even added that they are together like human parents and a child. The imp liked this analogy, and he confirmed that Lee Yun can be said to be his parent. The little imp also thought it would be useful to add that he would never leave Lee Yun and never betray him, because he is something more than Lee Yun can only imagine. Lee Yun-woo's look was no longer there. There was not a bit of emotion in it. He was clearly too tired of what was happening around him. Meanwhile, the little devil called himself Lee Yun's limitless potential and his boundless freedom. The little imp assured that the invisible chains that are on his neck and connect him to him cannot be broken by anyone, ever. They are connected to the very end, and no one can stop this. And at that moment, the little devil, holding Lee Yun's doll in his hands, promised him to give him everything he could wish for, only if he trusts him and follows him without doubt. However, instead of blindly trusting some little devil who caused you so much suffering, the Sigma protagonist told the little devil not to get away from the point in this way. He also added that he was not going to follow him, much less trust him. Looking at the little imp, he explained to him that he was asking him to torture a defenseless person, to take away from him even the freedom to retire, and subject him to eternal pain and despair. Lee Yun also noticed that the imp forces him to do all of the above only because of personal gain. He is also sure that it will not all end with one person. It was obvious that the imp needs many people. Lee Yun was very confident in his words. He told the little imp that no matter how many times he was beaten or how much he ate scraps, and even if he ended up with a miserable future, he still understood what the little imp was egging him on. Looking at the little devil, he continued to speak in the language of facts. He told him that he could make this terrifying application look like a game as much as he wanted, but this would not calm the conscience of our main character. The little imp answered Lee Yun-woo that now his world is half hell, in which he lives in it with those people who should not be in the underworld. So Lee Yun-woo, according to the imp, is simply obliged to send the sinners to where they belong. Hearing these words, Lee Yun once again turned his gaze to the sky. Surely these words again had a huge impact on Lee Yun, or discovered something new for him, maybe changed his view of this world. Meanwhile, the course of events moves back to the annex in which Kim Kwan is imprisoned for the second time, who once again struggles in agony and tries to beg forgiveness again. From now on, according to the words of the imp, Kim Kwan will seem pitiful and unhappy and full of remorse, but as we have already understood, there is absolutely no sincerity in those tears. Next, the imp takes out a special potion that can erase the memory of any person. To be more specific, the effect of this potion makes the victim forget the last 5 hours of his life. The little devil asked not to worry because it didn't hurt. As with the resurrection potion, immediately after the contents of the bottle came into contact with Kim Kwan, it immediately began to act. The little imp asked not to worry because he would simply fall into a deep and very peaceful sleep. At this time, while Kim Kwan is in a state of deep sleep, the potion will burn out the memories and awaken him back to consciousness, but without the memories of the last 5 hours of his life. Meanwhile, Kim Kwan-woo, under the influence of this potion, dissolved in space so much that his trace barely remained visible. Now that Kim Kwan-woo has lost the memory of the last 5 hours of his life, we return to the very beginning of this manhwa, where we started, but now we are aware of what happened and understand what's what. This time, the requests of Kim Kwan, even if this time he was impudent, were completely indifferent to our main character. He did not care at all, and there was almost nothing left from that Lee Yun who was worried about his victim. Without further ado, our main character, as a person who already had experience and had undergone training, listened to the devil's advice to start with a hand tool. Kim Kwan-woo was clearly not at all happy about this. Due to the fact that Kim Kwan-woo, as a result of the effect of the potion, lost his memory of absolutely everything that happened to him in hell, he was very arrogant and snapped at our main character, not even understanding what position he was in. If last time our main character was stopped by dark episodes from his past, now these episodes, on the contrary, gave him an impulse of anger that helped him come up with a way to mock him. Choosing a hand tool on the advice of the imp, Lee Yun-woo charged a powerful click. He no longer cared at all about the pain that Kim Kwan-woo was about to experience. In fact, this is where the story begins. How an abandoned and hated guy meets the devil. Being a smart guy, he understood what was inside the apple that the devil was offering him. After all, a terrible poison was hidden in the apple offered by the devil, but the boy was so hungry that the treasured fruit of the apple seemed so juicy that he had never tasted in his life. The boy who lived his whole life in pain, discrimination, betrayal, loneliness, and despair felt his stomach bursting with hunger. That is why, after the devil offered that boy an apple, even though it was poisonous, despite this, he decided to eat it. He didn't want to live like this, torturing even bad people, but he couldn't do anything about it. He had to come to terms with it. It was this harsh world that became the reason for his fatigue and hunger. It was this harsh, unjust world that became the reason for the birth of such a boy. Meanwhile, the course of events moves to the educational institution where our main character Lee Yun-woo is currently studying. It's a sunny, slightly cloudy day outside. The lesson in the office where Lee Yun is studying has already begun, and the teacher asks one of the students if he knows where Kim Kwan-woo is now. The boy with blonde hair briefly answers no. At this time, Lee Yun, who is the only one who knows where Kim Kwan is now, who is not in class right now, is silent, not saying a word. Next, the teacher asks the boy with slicked-back blonde hair to call Kwan, but he immediately replies that it is useless, and he in turn has probably met some girl again and is now hanging out with her. The boy eventually says that Kim Kwan, in his opinion, may show up in a day or two. The teacher is understanding and asks to let him know when he gets in touch. After a while, the lesson comes to an end, and the same boy with blonde, slicked hair leaves the class, but Yoon So-hee, who is clearly in a very bad mood, walks furiously towards him. The girl aggressively grabs the blonde man by the clothes and asks why Lee Yun-woo has such a face, but the blonde man does not take her seriously and asks her if she forgot to take her pills in the morning. But instead of answering, So-hee calls the guy to come with her. However, the guy replies that his life is precious to him, so he won't go anywhere with her. So-hee in turn threatens the guy that if they touch Lee Yun again, they will be finished. The blonde, perplexed by such a sudden attack from the girl, asks why she decided that it was they who attacked Lee Yun, so he asks the girl to calm down and go far away. However, this girl is clearly not a failure, because the threats did not frighten her one bit, but on the contrary gave her strength. But the blonde did not expect such pressure and gave up. Meanwhile, the same two guys from Kim Kwan's gang join in the showdown. They are surprised that So-hee is again trying to get close to the blonde, and the school crash on the right calls this sight extremely pathetic. In addition to the fact that these two arrived rather untimely, this school crasher was also filming in order to use the video for personal gain. Then this school crash began to incite Yoon So-hee to show how she was poisoning a blonde boy right in the school corridor. They did this with the hope that her parents would pay them a lot of money to delete this video. However, the budget Jungkook from BTS also got involved in this small incident. He approached the school crash in a mask, and covering the camera lens with his fingers, showed off in front of Yoon So-hee. Next, this budget Jungkook explained what So-hee allegedly couldn't explain. He told these bullies that So-hee thought about them for the reason that it was their gang of hooligans who bullied Lee Yun most often. These two tried to somehow justify themselves, but Jungkook interrupted them by saying that the fact that their gang offends Liu Yun is a well-known fact. Jungkook also deleted the video that they recently shot in order to once again draw beautifully in front of So-hee. However, the hooligans continued to stand their ground, saying that this time they really had nothing to do with it, and So-hee scolded them and grabbed them by the collar. The school crasher was extremely dissatisfied because he was not in the know at all. Crash of School continued to make excuses to Jungkook, saying that he and Taeyong spent the whole weekend at the recreation center in Gapyeong and did not get out of there at all to do anything with Lee Yun. To earn Jungkook's trust, the school crasher from Kim Kwan's gang even told Jungkook in detail that after they arrived at the base, they immediately got drunk and then went away from it for 2 days. This time, the king of the school was really right, because as proof of his innocence, he was even ready to show photos of the girls he photographed and posted on Instagram. But the king of the school did not need such details, or he later sent him a direct message. After Jungkook investigated the case of Yoon So-hee's groundless attack, he turned to her and told her that she was wrong in this situation, asking her to apologize to the guys for the misunderstanding. Jungkook blatantly pretended that he didn't know anything. He told Yoon So-hee that the guys really weren't involved in Lee Yun's sight, and therefore most likely he did it to himself. But alas, they can't do anything about it. However, Yoon So-hee, even though she was wrong in this situation, still refused to apologize to them. As an argument, she cited the actions that these bullies had performed before, so she believed that she did not need to apologize. Suddenly, Jungkook remembered that he had his own pawn under the name Kim Kwan, and out of decency, he asked his gang if he had called them. Kim Kwan-woo's gang immediately replied that he doesn't even answer calls, and they don't answer Ji-hyun's sister either. Jungkook defiantly thought about it when he heard this. Due to the fact that Kim Kwon was not there, Jungkook, scratching his head, entrusted Jungwoo Hee-ja to look after Lee Yunwoo. Most likely he meant not to take care of Lee Yunwoo, but rather to make sure that he was not feeling well. After the budget, Itadori and Saitama moved away from Jungkook to a safe distance. Saitama said that he was simply sick of this handsome hypocrite, and Itadori in response joked that he should not talk about his master like that. Itadori explained what he said by saying that Jungkook was showering them with money, so they need to behave like his faithful dogs. The bald guy immediately changed his mind immediately after he heard something about money. After this conversation, the three began to discuss how much Jungkook was given for pocket money. One of them was smarter than the rest, and he suggested that Jungkook had been investing for a long time, which is why he could afford to throw money away. Itadori was very surprised that while they were struggling with their studies, even if it wasn't visible to them, at this time the rich were already learning about real life. Studying and exams were just a hobby for their master Jungkook. While the two continued to laugh at Jungkook behind his back, the guy with the slicked back hairstyle couldn't come to his senses. Something was clearly bothering him very much, and that something was on the screen of his phone. On the display of his phone, a correspondence with Kim Kwon was opened. The first message from whom was a joyful message about the discovery of Lee Yoon, but after that, he did not respond for 3 whole days, and there was no news about him at all. On Kim Kwon's avatar, there was a photo of him with this blonde man. They were probably best friends, if the blonde man knew where his friend had been and where he was now. Meanwhile, we return back to the Devil's application. We observe the demon who is engaged in issuing jobs for prisoners in hellish rise. After our main character indicated the victim for which it was necessary to choose a suitable job, a window of characteristics of Kim Kwon opened in front of us. In a moment, the perfect system of hell assigned him to the most difficult job in the burning mine of hell, where he will be obliged to mine valuable minerals and ores and receive only pain in return. However, this is hell, which means there is no peace here even when working in the mine, since Kim Kwon-woo's peace was interrupted by the sudden appearance of a crow killer about 6 meters in size. Also, in addition to the huge killer mole who was already chasing Kim Kwon to play very serious games with him, there was also a leakage of hellish sulfuric acid, which meant that Kim Kwon now had to run away from 2 dangers. All this time, while Kim Kwon was in the mine, he brought his master, that is, Lee Yoon, 3 currencies at once. Mainly, he brought points of pain and fear with his work. After a 20-hour shift in the mine, Kim Kwon-woo was immediately assigned as a waiter at a vampire banquet. In hell, he should have worked every 24 hours. The vampire banquet was especially difficult to work with due to the fact that the vampire count was very whimsical, and the countess needed a person with very good vitality. Who knows why she needed such a person? Next, we observed the true role of Kim Kwon at this banquet. He played the role not of a waiter, but the role of a special drink for the beautiful vampire countess. It was clearly visible from his face that he needed to check his pulse. This banquet also brought in a nice amount of 2 types of currencies for its host. The currencies were also mostly an overwhelming amount of the currency called pain, and a little less of the currency of fear. Immediately after Kim Kwon-woo finished working at the vampire banquet, he was assigned to work in the lower arena of hell, where, apparently, he was forced to fight armed skeletons and more. Kim Kwon-woo wasn't that bad. He even managed to defeat the hungry, sad skeleton of the first level, albeit with some effort, but still. Kim Kwon-woo rejoiced too early in his victory over the sad skeleton of the first level, because right after him, a huge demon of despair appeared in the arena and occupied almost the entire arena. At that moment, the guy realized that his career as a gladiator was over in this fight. Kim Kwon-woo's entry into the gladiator arena of hell also brought currency to his master. This time he even brought some despair currency points. All the activities we were observing right now were AFK activities like in mobile games. Lee Yunwoo didn't even take any part in them, but suddenly, while he was sitting at his desk, he received a notification. Picking up the phone, Lee Yoon was very surprised because on the display he saw the very gloomy body of Kim Kwon. He took a closer look to study in more detail what happened to his victim. Then he was met with a not very happy notification that his second-level victim Kim Kwon decided to end his life early using his personal methods. Most likely he used a swing and a chandelier. Suddenly, Lee Yoon was interrupted from studying the application. It was the girl he loved, Yoon So-hee. Approaching him, she asked why he did not respond. She assumed that he was busy, but still approached him. It was clearly not easy for Yoon So-hee to approach. Judging by her expression, gathering her strength, she invited our main character to go to the cafeteria together. Her face was quite funny. Lee Yoonwoo simply had no right to refuse such a beautiful girl as Yoon So-hee. He smiled widely and accepted Yoon So-hee's invitation to go to the cafeteria together. Suddenly, on the way to the cafeteria, Yoon So-hee grabbed Lee Eun by the face and asked him who did this to his face. She clearly cared very much about him, because it was clear from her that she really cared about it. However, instead of answering, Lee Yoonwoo blushed and tried to convince Yoon So-hee that it was just a trifle and she shouldn't think about it because everything was fine. But Yoon So-hee was not at all satisfied with this answer. She was even angry. She told Lee Yoon that he must tell her who did this to him. Only in this case, she will be able to provide at least some help. After that, Lee Yoonwoo sat down on the nearest bench and the caring Yoon So-hee continued her examination. Lee Yoonwoo asked her not to poke his face because it hurt him, but she replied that she was poking for a reason. Yoon So-hee was very unhappy that Lee Yoonwoo had a lot of scars and injuries on his face. Suddenly, she pointed to the scar that was near his nose and asked him if his father had done this. But Lee Yoonwoo apologized, saying that he had reasons not to talk about it speak. As soon as Yoon So-hee heard this unexpected answer from Lee Yoon, she pulled back her hand in surprise. She was clearly ashamed for bringing up a topic that was most likely quite painful for our main character. After this little awkward incident, the two sat on opposite sides of the same bench. After a while, Yoon So-hee broke the silence and apologized for accidentally touching on a sore subject. However, judging by Lee Yoon's mood and behavior, this incident did not hurt him at all. Suddenly, he turned towards Yoon So-ha and quietly said her name. But Yoon So-hee at that moment continued to blush heavily and worry that she had done something wrong, namely, accidentally touched upon Lee Yoon's sore subject. At least she herself came to that conclusion. Suddenly, Lee Yoonwoo asked a very spontaneous and strange question. He asked what if, purely theoretically, he did something very terrible, for example, take a person's life. At the moment of uttering this question, our main character was holding a phone in his hand, in which a lot of terribly dark and creepy things had happened over these few days. After listening to Yoon So-hee's question, she turned to Lee Yoon and looked at him questioningly. She was clearly a little surprised by the harshness of this strange question from Lee Yoon, who very rarely asks any questions anyway. Without waiting for an answer from Yoon So-hee, our protagonist clarified his question by asking if she would hate him if he actually took someone's life. However, after a moment, Yoon So-hee became very suspiciously silent, and her gaze became empty, and not a drop of emotion was visible in it. She clearly reacted sharply to this question from Lee Yoon. However, instead of answering, not a word came out of her mouth. Lee Yoon patiently waited for an answer to his question, silently looking at Yoon So-hee, who had been blushing very recently, but now no emotions were emanating from her. Meanwhile, the course of events is transferred to the thoughts of our main character. The gray, slightly gloomy building of the educational institution in which our main character studies pops up in his head. School always seemed to Lee Yoon a very strange place, because only in this place were princes, beggars, princesses, and hooligans sitting at the same desk in the same uniform. And when a poor brat like our main character hangs out with someone of the above stripes, they almost immediately get into serious trouble. Even as a child, the criminal father of our main character constantly mercilessly mocked Lee Yoonwoo, which is why he later stopped being afraid of blows altogether, at which time Lee Yoonwoo remembers how his father, being drunk, constantly mocked him terribly. Starting from middle school, our Lee Yoonwoo got involved with boys who absolutely all ran away from their homes. Lee Yoonwoo believed that this could be called talent, because he was born predisposed to such work. Next, we watch the same hooligan who is apparently at the police station at the moment, and with a slight injury, a man in a suit patted the guy on the shoulders and told him that if he continues like this, he will certainly go to jail for up to 40 years. However, the blonde didn't care about everything this man said. The man, in turn, called this guy's case very interesting because he was amazed and called him his best client. He also added that if this boy's excessive pride was reduced and he was made to show more respect and reverence, he would become wonderful. And our main character met Kim Ji-hoon, or the budget Jungkook, around the 9th grade. Everyone knew him as a rich man who lived in a luxurious, huge house. And this guy's face was always very pretty, and even disgusting in some places. It was immediately clear from it that he had been rolling around like cheese since birth. The same blonde man we recently heard about was also acquainted with Jungkook. At the moment of meeting, Jungkook was only thinking about how to scam this guy, and he told him to his face that he needed a psycho who was capable of literally anything for money. Therefore, Jungkook immediately decided to warn the blonde with slicked back hair that if he is not ready for money to be his dog that follows all orders, then he can just leave right now. But after the cheap version of Jungkook saw that this blonde was not going to go anywhere, he handed him an envelope which was probably generously stuffed with money. Jungkook, throwing his bills from his expensive wallet directly onto the floor, told the blonde that he would give him this money, but only in order to get it would he need to lick his floor. Then we watched the pieces of paper slowly falling down. As soon as the blonde saw them, the word money was loudly pronounced in his mind. The checks that Kim Ji-hoon would throw at that moment as a joke. The sight of these pieces of paper was enough to make the blonde tremble, because only this money could stop the constant sounds of the blonde's grandmother's continuous coughing at night, because this guy didn't care about his voice or dirty clothes. Since childhood, this blonde had a desire to have money and a mother. He also wanted a father who would not beat him. Suddenly, while on the playground, he discovered a little thing that was in very bad shape. But the guy very quickly realized that he couldn't see all this, and all he had to do was survive and need to do something. He had already set his sights on this little thing that was lying badly. The blonde continued to rapidly approach the little thing that he was about to pick up. But suddenly the owner of this little thing appeared in his field of vision, who appeared and interrupted his plans to pick up this little thing. Taking a closer look at the man who took the treasured item, the blonde recognized Lee Yoon, whom he, like everyone else, considered the offspring of a neighboring murderer. Since Lee Yoon's father left prison, he has been starving and suffering beatings. The harmful and cruel children who dislike him always take away his food cards, and after that he has no choice but to be hungry. It is for this reason that Lee Yoon-woo has always had a very frail physique. At that moment, an equally hungry guy watched Lee Yoon slowly leaving. The thought came to him of taking away the food card from Lee Yoon, but before executing the plan, he waited for the ant who was nearby to move away. Suddenly, a very unexpected thing happened. Lee Yoon, who picked up the food card from the ground, was not actually its owner. And immediately after the discovery, the conscientious Lee Yoon returned the food card to the woman who dropped it. Immediately after Lee Yoon-woo did this and that ant walked away, the blonde took Lee Yoon by the clothes and began calling him names, asking why he did it, because this woman just recently called him a brat of a murderer in front of other children. However, the slightly confused Lee Yoon-woo did not deny that that woman called him the offspring of a murderer. But nevertheless, according to him, he did what was right. At that moment, the blonde, who was only thinking about himself, simply could not believe what he heard. He only told him that it was not for nothing that he had bad grades at school, because in the blonde's opinion, Lee Yoon-woo was not at all friendly with his head. The little boy explained to Lee Yoon that there is no point in pretending to be kind, because no one will ever appreciate his actions, because no one cares about people like him. He continued by saying that to these people, they are just spoiled and unfeeling spawn of criminals. Meanwhile, we watched a matured blonde who was ready to lick the floor standing right in front of Jungkook on his knees for pieces of paper that he did not even have time to identify. Jungkook watched contentedly as the blonde humiliated himself in front of him and licked the floor of his expensive house. He clearly liked this spectacle because he got more receipts. At that moment, the blonde explained to Lee Yoon on the playground at a very young age that the world tramples people like them without even noticing it, and then no one ever remembers them. In any case, that same blonde was firmly convinced of this. It was for these reasons that he always gave all of himself to dirty work and gave his all just to get money. At that moment, it seemed to him that such a dirty brat like him was entitled only to the same dirty work. At that moment, he was sure that this was how it should be, and it could not be otherwise. The hooligans always looked askance at Lee Yoon-woo, who, driven into himself, always walked around depressed. They always discussed when they saw him that he was given a scholarship for studying a lot. They always joked that he had licked the granite of science. But everything changed the moment Lee Yoon-woo became the best student of the school. All students of the school received a notification about this, and it was also written whose son he was. Therefore, it was from that moment that too much attention was paid to him, which ultimately led to consequences.